Hello everyone, my name is Deirdre Pike and I'd like to welcome you to Outing the Conversation, a show that we take out of the studio and into the community, where we take conversations out of the closet and into the hearts and minds of Hamiltonians. Today we are going to out the conversation about the LGBT purge in the Canadian military. And today I am so proud to welcome our guest, Michelle Douglas. Michelle is credited with changing the policy of discrimination in the Canadian military connected to the LGBT purge. And we're going to dive into that today. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks very much for having me.
You know, we met in Hamilton, and for the first couple of times that we were in the room together, you were in the room as a guest with the Rainbow Kings and Queens, a group of LGBTQ refugees from various African countries who have escaped with their lives, really, and we're so grateful to have them here. And we get support from various member groups in the community, including Hamilton Police Service. So somebody was in the group that night from Hamilton Police, and they brought along their wife, and that was you. And it took me a couple of sessions till I realized that Michelle Douglas. So I want to ask you a question that can get us started a little bit into who you are in some ways. That's a backseat role you took in that room, you know, and showed me a real example of humility. And I wondered, you know, you took on a role that was not backseat, that was front and center, and you might have had to overcome all kinds of things to become that person. And now I see you as this backseat kind of, there you are with a presence so dignified, and yet you've done so much. Tell me a bit about that and who you are in that role.
Well, I love that you use the word humility. I find it such an important kind of way of being because, you know, the activism that I've had a chance to do, I feel really privileged around doing it. I have been on a long journey. You know, I was a young woman when I joined the Canadian Armed Forces back in the mid-1980s, and, you know, was fired and later brought a really landmark lawsuit that changed the circumstance for people who are queer trying to serve in the military. But, you know, I also, you know, have gone on and done other things, done other forms of work, and then have a family. And so to be in community with my wife, who is a police officer, I think that's a role I love. It appeals to me to be learning and connecting with what's going on with Rainbow Kings and Queens. I think they're amazing. And like you, I think we're very lucky that it's a kind of, you know, it's really, we're very fortunate to have them come to Hamilton and the area. So yeah, being part of community makes me feel good, and I like to kind of dive in and help where I can. And it makes me feel like an activist again in a way. Yeah,
that's great.
It does.
You know, one of the things that you did for the Rainbow Kings and Queens was you brought a guest, Sven Robinson. Can you tell me, you know, and that might bring us back to near the beginning of your story, like who is that? Why it was so important that he came to visit the Rainbow Kings and Queens?
Well, Sven Robinson is a friend of mine and has been for more than 30 years. He played a pivotal role in my life, and we remain friends more than 30 years later. So when I was in the military, I knew about Canada's first openly gay member of Parliament. He was a member of Parliament for riding out on the West Coast in Burnaby, British Columbia. And, you know, I remember him coming out and just thinking, I still have the Maclean's magazine with him on the front of it. You know, he was this openly gay young man at the time. And when I was struggling with the military, under investigation, under interrogation, and about to be kicked out, fired from the military because I'm a lesbian, I went to a lecture and saw him. And at the end of it, you know, when people line up, I encountered him and said, I'm in a lot of trouble. Can you help me? And he said, of course, I'll help you. Call me. Well, I was also at the same time kind of nervous to call a member of parliament. Like I didn't feel confident. So he eventually tracked me down. He remembered my name and reached out to me, figured out a way to connect. And so he did help me. He brought me to a lawyer. Harriet Sachs and Clayton Ruby were my lawyers, and we brought a major lawsuit against the military for firing me because I'm a lesbian. Right on my documents that fired me, it says, not advantageously employable due to homosexuality. So this was 1989, you know.
Did you call yourself a lesbian then? You know, what was your identity? How?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I love that because, you know, I always felt like there was an inconsistency by being fired for being a homosexual or a lesbian when I just barely had, you know, fallen in love with a woman. I didn't really understand the politics, the community, the language, none of it. I just knew how I felt. And here I was, starting on a course of being fired for being a lesbian, becoming, you know, known in the community in that way, and barely having any connection to the language, the words. So, you know, it was something I caught up to later, later on. But yeah, it was just the experience that I had had and didn't really know about labels yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, at that time period, I still used the word gay for myself, you know, and lots of women still do, and that's fine, you know. But you know, when it's so clear that, you know, you've said it a few times, you know, I was fired for being a lesbian, but yeah. So anyway, there you are.
That's right, and here I am. I mean, you know, with a life of activism now for more than 30 years. Sven was part of it. And he and I continue to do work together. He's writing a book about the LGBT Purge. And I think it'll be interesting for people who have never heard of it to know that more than 9,000 people who put up their hands to serve Canada, so not only the military, but the RCMP and the Federal Public Service, 9,000 people were harassed, hunted down, in the military, sometimes arrested, criminalized, like institutionalized, given shock treatment. Like, it is a time in Canadian history that's just so shameful and shocking. And it really happened. It also happened to me.
Yeah. And you joined with like intentions of doing this for the rest of your life. Like, you didn't pick the reserves.
I wanted to be my career.
You're from a family, your father wasn't in the military, but he was a public servant.
That's right.
So you grew up already like with a commitment to serving. You understood community.
Exactly right.
All good intentions.
Yeah, and you know, I went to the Hamilton recruiting station, just not far from here, you know, and walked in, wanted to explore it, and you know, I was really compelled by what they had on offer, so I signed up for, at that time, a minimum of 9-year commitment to serve in the regular force and to go into the military police. I would be in the officer stream, so I would go first to get my commission as an officer, and I loved it. Like, it was a good fit, you know? Yeah.
Now, were you showing up to work worried that you had a relationship? Like, back in those early days, was it something that you were, concerned that you were hiding this, or was it something that you thought was well handled and it hit you out of the blue?
Well, I mean, we were deeply closeted. There were a lot of lesbians in the military, I started to know. But yeah, we were very, very hidden about it, very nervous about what could happen to us. We wanted to preserve our careers. We loved serving Canada in this way. We're really good at it. Dedicated, disciplined, but you know, also think about the age that we were. We would all be in our very early 20s. I had a university degree by that point, but we were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And, meeting other women or meeting other people from around the country who were also motivated to serve. And it was at once amazing. Like, I was so proud to serve Canada, and also very terrified that I would be found out.
Yeah. I wasn't serving in the same way, but I was serving in the Catholic Church, so the closet is so familiar to me for a very long time. And it's hard when you're showing up all the time with this mental gymnastics of how committed you are to one thing and aware of the paradox about what's happening. So there you are, actually, such a commendable officer that you're in now the Special Investigations Unit, thinking that you're heading out to investigate someone for something, and it's you. Yeah. And that must have been something that, does it still bring you a little case of the sweats, or,
Yeah. Well, I had been placed in this Special Investigations Policing Unit because I'd been at the top of all of my classes and was really thriving there. So I was only the second woman officer ever to be posted in that unit. And, I was told one day to gather my things. We were going, not long after I'd arrived, right? And, gather my things. We were flying from the base in Toronto to Ottawa for an investigation to let's go. I was so excited, like my first, investigation, I guess. And, we drove out in the undercover K car that we had and went towards the Toronto airport, but instead turned off and ended up on the airport strip where all the motels and hotels are. And I was taken into a hotel. I knew then I was in big trouble. Taken up to the 8th floor of this hotel room, and the door open. There's 2 men, police officers in civilian clothes. They were from my very unit, although I didn't know them. And I spent 2 days in that hotel room for the first round of interrogations that I endured, just for being gay, right?
Yeah.
This was the focus of their investigation. That, and then loyalty to Canada. There was an idea that anyone who was gay, lesbian, bi, would be disloyal to Canada, which is such a specious, false argument. It's, in the history of those 40 years of the Purge, never once, not one queer spy did they ever find.
Right.
These were the kinds of defenses or allegations that they advanced as the reason that they would hunt us.
We're not the loose lips that sank ships.
It's actually true.
Right?
It's true. We were not. We were loyal, we were dedicated, and frankly, it was the very policy that kept us hidden. We weren't by nature secretive. We would love to have talked about the people we loved, but it was the policies that forced us into secrecy. And ultimately, after, interrogation and then being flown eventually to Ottawa, while attached to a polygraph exam, the lie detector test, I put my hands up as if to surrender and said, yes, I'm in love with a woman, I'm a lesbian, and that led really ultimately to my dismissal from the military. I'd been the top candidate in every military course I took. I'm not saying that to be immodest or to brag. It just shows you that if I wasn't advantageously employable due to homosexuality, this was a discriminatory and wrong policy, and I knew it, and I fought it.
Yes, and you were surrounded serendipitously with the right people to bolster you into that position to be the first case that really brought this policy to its knees. Is that right?
That's right, and I think you point out something that's important. I know I've had luck in the kind of context of this personal misery for me. I have had good fortune throughout. I've met the right person said they'd help me. My family was with me all along. They loved me then, they love me now. And, so there was just this kind of, even in the midst of hardship, good fortune that I had. And, right at the very beginning, I talked about the privilege of activism. That's, part of it is being like at the right moment in the right place and time. Others were trying to fight this as well. But I had a great case. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms was in place. And I had a great team.
Yeah. There are so many people today, young, all ages, in the queer and trans community who do not have a good team, who do not have the right people around them.
Well, they have us.
And they have us. And, I want to I want to hear from you about, what is it that we can do the strongest, I guess, to, to supplement that. I just run into young people who don't have the parents who are loving them the way yours did, the way mine did. Even though we all went through different kinds of struggles, to have that team. What do we do? How do we act as individuals and as community to create those teams for others?
Yeah, I think we have a role to play in reassuring these people that they have worth, self-worth, that it's important we hear from their voices, that we will accompany them on an activist journey, or that we have fought for them in the past and we're fighting for them today. And what I mean by that is that, we have been working as activists on systems changes and, in some ways, opening people's hearts and minds with the reality of our existence, with visibility, with reassuring people about kind of who we are, and talking about our own families, our contribution to community and society generally. I think those are really important things. Yeah. I am guided by this quote. I love it. It's from the Senator Murray Sinclair, who is no longer with us, but he said, "It was education that got us into this mess, and it's education that will get us out of this mess." He was, of course, talking about Indian residential schools and the travesty there. And I'm not analogizing the circumstances, but I am pulling on this idea of education. Telling people about the past, what happened, is really important to ground people in the moment of our current struggle and challenges. We've overcome things in the past, hard things, and we can do it now. We can help folks understand what was successful for us in movement building and fighting, and hand the torch over. But I think telling people how important they are, to add their voice, and that it's respected. That's one of the things that I find works pretty well.
In the military, there's still so much change to happen. We see other movements, right, around women, around sexual abuse, and systemic change in other areas. I also hear from people who haven't heard your story, and it's almost 35 years old, because I think there's still change that needs to happen. I'm sure now we can't say, yes, LGBT people in the military are all great now because this happened, right? Like there's, there's just all kinds of other intersections and so on around issues. I saw at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, I happened to be there, a display. And there you are, as part of, again, telling the story. There's going to be a monument, is that right, coming? And I wondered if you could talk about the importance of that, because, it ain't over. It's just, you can't just like, oh yeah, we won that case, and I've gone on to, other things. So.
Well, you've given me a lot there, but I think what I'd say is ending discrimination by policy and ending discrimination are two very different things. So, what I saw then is, oh, okay, this really matters to me, and I'll be committed to it for as long as I can be. So I think that's going to be a lifetime. And I've been talking about my story for more than 30 years, and so have a lot of other people too. But I think now there's a far greater traction. And that was amplified in around 2018, 2017, 2018. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau then gave an apology to the 2S LGBTQI plus community from the House of Commons, not only to Purge survivors, but to the broader queer community, queer and trans community. And by the way, he used the word, or at least named I in his listing of the acronym for our community. Never before have I heard a Prime Minister raise or include intersex people, which is really important. I'm so glad he did. Yeah. But the apology was delivered in 2017, and then a class action lawsuit for those survivors of the Purge who had never had someone say they were sorry, who had never received compensation for what they had been through, the misery of it, decades earlier. So this class action lawsuit, and I'll just say that it wasn't available to me to bring a class action lawsuit back in the 90s. Didn't exist as kind of an avenue of justice and so on. So anyway, 2018, all of these people now come forward and start telling their stories by 2018. And an organization in that lawsuit was set up called the LGBT Purge Fund. And I have the honor to lead it now as its executive director. And work with some incredible people who have also been, kind of leaders in this movement as well. And you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned a display. We've worked with the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg to create a huge exhibition, which is on display now and into 2026 in Winnipeg. But we also have a traveling exhibit to tell the stories of the LGBT Purge. And so that's what you saw in Ottawa.
Can you bring it here?
Sure.
I mean,
we want it to
wouldn't it be
travel.
great if it was
We
in
want it to
Hamilton?
travel. We want it to go everywhere. I want it to be in every Legion, every airport, places, library, places where people go and could see it.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned was the National Monument. And the LGBT Purge Fund will pay more than, I think, $14 or $15 million. We are using the funds we got from that lawsuit to build a national monument to the 2S LGBTQI plus community. It's called Thunderhead. It's being built really in the shadow of Parliament Hill in Ottawa, in a beautiful piece of land, which is unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin land. But we have had access to this land. So this monument is going to be unbelievably beautiful. It's 11 meters tall. It's a structure like a cylinder rising into the air. And inside is like the hollowed out, inside of what you would imagine a cloud to be. That's why we call it Thunderhead. It's lined with glass tiles. Think disco tiles. With lots of lighting, and there's a stage that comes out. It'll hold thousands of people in the area, in this park. There's a board or a wall that will tell the story, really from the time of colonization to the time of the Purge. So this is now the work we're doing.
It's amazing.
Not just for people who experienced the Purge, but for the wider queer community. It's the first national monument of its kind anywhere in the world. Even though there are other monuments, I can think of Berlin, Amsterdam, New York, that are really for the queer community. This is the first national monument, and what a place it will be. Wow.
That must be amazing, and congratulations on being able to be the leader of that team that's bringing that to us. The pin that you've been wearing, is it connected to that? Or your honorary colonel?
No, you mentioned that, the lawsuit, the class action lawsuit. For people who were so damaged by the Purge, there was a strong expression that some kind of recognition, an apology, yes, but some outward sign to people that they had survived the purge. And a lot of people wanted a medal, from the military saying, hey, that was like war. You betrayed us and we tried to serve. But in the end, what was decided was a thing called the Canada Pride Citation, issued by the Herald of Canada, right? So the chief crest maker and so on. And I'm wearing mine today. It's a beautiful pin, the 8 colors of the original Gilbert Baker queer pride flag. Pride flag. And so a lot of people have said to me, oh, that's so beautiful. Where do I get one? And I say, these pins are special. The reason I got it is not something you wanted to be part of. But you see, every now and then I'll go to a function, I see other pins. I'm like, hi, I know a lot more about you just by seeing, that pin.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I also want to say that as in, that Bill Blair, the Minister of Defense, made you an honorary colonel, which is, something else we could unpack in another show. But today we've been really lucky to be here in the Hamilton Club having this conversation, because here in Hamilton we have an honorary lieutenant colonel, Shendel Yelchin, and I know that you're working to connect a little more with the Argyles and so on, some of the Hamilton military story here now that you're connected here in Hamilton. And I think, I'm really glad that we are able to bring you here into Hamilton and that we could out this conversation today. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for tuning in to this show where we take community conversations right out to you and out LGBT conversations into your hearts and minds. So thanks for tuning in today. Thank you, Michelle. And we'll see you next time on Outing the Conversation.